silent hunters that prowled beneath the waves for 45 years. From diesel-electric patrol boats to nuclear leviathans carrying civilization-ending arsenals, Cold War submarines represented the ultimate strategic weapon. These underwater warriors didn't just hunt ships, they hunted each other in a deadly game of cat and mouse that never stopped, lurking in the depths where one mistake meant instant death for the entire crew. This is every Cold War submarine. Soviet ballistic missile submarines, the submarines that could end the world. Project 629, NATO reporting name Golf class. The Soviet Union's first ballistic missile submarine. Introduced in 1958, it carried 3 R-11 missiles in its sail, requiring the boat to surface before launch. These diesel-electric boats were dangerously vulnerable during their firing sequence, essentially sitting ducks for NATO hunters. 23 were built before the Soviets realized they needed something better. Project 658, the Hotel-class nuclear submarine. Launched in 1960, this marked the Soviet Union's entry into the Nuclear Ballistic Missile Submarine Club. It carried 3 R-13 missiles and could stay submerged far longer than its diesel predecessors. 8 boats terrorized NATO planners, though their noisy reactors made them relatively easy to track. One boat, K-19, suffered a catastrophic reactor accident in 1961 that killed 8 crew members and earned it the nickname Hiroshima. Project 667A, NATO designation Yankee class, the first Soviet submarine that truly frightened the West. Introduced in 1967, it carried 16 R-27 missiles and could patrol off American coasts undetected. 34 boats were built, representing the largest class of nuclear ballistic missile submarines ever constructed. These sleek predators finally gave the Soviet Union credible second strike capability. Their presence forced the United States to maintain constant vigilance along its coastlines. Project 667B, the Delta-class family. A revolutionary design that changed submarine warfare forever. First launched in 1972. These massive boats carried 12 to 16 R-29 missiles with ranges exceeding 4,000 miles. This meant they could patrol in Soviet-protected waters near the Arctic and still hit American targets. 4 subclasses were built over 2 decades, with 43 boats total. The Delta full variant remains in Russian service today, a testament to the design's endurance. Project 941, NATO name Typhoon class, the largest submarines ever built. These colossal boats displaced 26,000 tons, submerged and stretched longer than 2 football fields. Introduced in 1981, each carried 20 R-39 submarine-launched ballistic missiles, capable of delivering 200 nuclear warheads. 6 were built at astronomical cost. Their double-hull design made them incredibly survivable, but also incredibly expensive. The titanium-hulled giants represented the absolute pinnacle of Soviet submarine construction, though only one remains in service today. Soviet cruise missile submarines. The Submarine Fleet Hunters, Project 659, the Echo I class. The world's first nuclear-powered cruise missile submarine. Launched in 1960, it carried 6 P-5 anti-ship missiles designed to destroy aircraft carrier battle groups. 5 boats were built, each requiring surface running to launch their weapons. This vulnerability made them the prime targets, and the class was quickly superseded by more capable designs. Project 675, NATO designation Echo II class, an improved cruise missile submarine that became the backbone of Soviet naval aviation hunting. Introduced in 1963, it carried 8 P-6 missiles and could launch them while surfaced. 29 boats prowled the seas, specifically tasked with destroying American carrier groups before they could launch strikes against the Soviet Union. Their distinctive missile tube configuration made them instantly recognizable to Western observers. Project 670, the Charlie-class submarine, a revolutionary design that could finally launch missiles while submerged. First commissioned in 1968, it carried 8 P-70 anti-ship missiles in individual tubes. 17 boats of 2 variants terrorized NATO planners throughout the 70s and 80s. These compact hunters could sprint at over 27 knots submerged, making them exceptionally dangerous to surface fleets. Project 949, NATO name Oscar class. The ultimate carrier killers. These massive boats, introduced in 1980, carried 24 P-700 Granite supersonic anti-ship missiles. Each missile weighed 7 tons and could destroy an aircraft carrier with a single hit. 14 were built across 2 variants. The Oscar II, at over 19,000 tons submerged, represented the second largest submarine class ever constructed. One boat, the Kursk, tragically sank in 2000 after a torpedo explosion killed all 118 crew members. Soviet attack submarines, the Silent Killers, Project 627, reporting name November class. The Soviet Union's first nuclear attack submarine. Launched in 1958, this pioneering design suffered from dangerously unreliable reactors and poor construction quality. 13 boats were built despite numerous accidents, including reactor failures and fires. They were loud, temperamental, and frequently broke down, but they proved nuclear submarine operations were possible for the Soviet Navy. Project 645, a bizarre experimental design. This was the only submarine ever powered by a lead-bismuth liquid metal reactor. One boat was built in 1963 and christened K-27. The exotic reactor promised incredible performance but proved catastrophically unreliable. A reactor accident in 1968 killed 9 crew members and contaminated the entire boat. It was towed to shallow water and deliberately sunk, its reactor still containing radioactive fuel. Project 671, the Victor-class submarine family. A revolutionary design that finally gave the Soviets a competitive attack submarine. First launched in 1967, these boats were quieter, faster, and more reliable than anything the Soviet Navy had previously built. 48 boats across 3 variants served throughout the Cold War. The Victor III, introduced in 1978, was so quiet that NATO submariners grudgingly admitted it approached Western standards. These hunters could finally threaten American ballistic missile submarines in their patrol areas. Project 705, NATO designation Alpha Class. The most revolutionary submarine of the Cold War, built from titanium and powered by a liquid metal reactor, it could dive deeper than 3,200 feet and sprint at over 41 knots submerged. 7 boats were commissioned between 1971 and 1981, each costing as much as a small aircraft carrier. They could outrun torpedoes and crush depth was theoretical for most Western weapons. But the exotic reactors required constant maintenance and the titanium hulls were brutally expensive. The entire class was retired by 1996. Project 685, known as Mike Class. Another titanium-hulled experimental design. Only one boat was built, the famous K-278 Komsomolets, commissioned in 1983. It held the world record for deepest dive by a combat submarine, reaching 4,000 feet. But the experimental design proved tragically flawed. In 1989, a fire broke out during patrol, forcing the crew to surface. The boat sank in the Norwegian Sea, killing 42 of 69 crew members. Project 945, the Sierra-class submarine, a refined titanium design that corrected the Alpha's flaws. 4 boats were built between 1984 and 1993, representing the Soviet Union's last titanium submarines. They could dive to 2,500 feet, far deeper than any NATO boat, and were remarkably quiet for their size. These sophisticated hunters remain in Russian service, their titanium hulls still superior to modern steel designs. Project 971, NATO name Akula class, the culmination of Soviet attack submarine development. Introduced in 1984, these boats finally achieved acoustic parity with American submarines. 15 were built before the Soviet collapse, each representing the absolute cutting edge of underwater warfare technology. They were large, capable, and genuinely frightening to NATO submariners who had grown accustomed to acoustic superiority. The Akula proved the Soviets had finally mastered quiet submarine operations. American ballistic missile submarines. Let's look at America's underwater deterrent, George Washington class. America's first nuclear ballistic missile submarine. Commissioned in 1959, it carried 16 Polaris missiles and revolutionized nuclear strategy. 5 boats were built in just 2 years, each capable of destroying 16 cities from beneath the waves. These boats made the ballistic missile submarine the ultimate strategic weapon, invulnerable to first strikes and capable of assured retaliation. The class established American dominance in submarine warfare that would last throughout the Cold War. Ethan Allen class. An improved ballistic missile design, commissioned in 1961. 5 boats carried 16 Polaris A-2 missiles, with greater range and accuracy than their predecessors. These submarines spent most of their careers on deterrent patrols, silently circling beneath the Arctic ice or prowling the depths of the Atlantic. One boat, the USS Sam Houston, was later converted to carry Special Operations Forces, trading missiles for Navy SEALs, Lafayette class, the backbone of America's submarine deterrent force. 31 boats were commissioned between 1963 and 1967, the largest class of nuclear submarines ever built by the United States. Each carried 16 ballistic missiles, initially Polaris, and later the more capable Poseidon system. These boats conducted thousands of deterrent patrols over 3 decades, maintaining constant vigilance against Soviet aggression. Their presence guaranteed mutual assured destruction and helped keep the Cold War cold. Benjamin Franklin class. An improved Lafayette variant optimized for the Poseidon missile system. 12 boats joined the fleet between 1965 and 1967. They featured quieter machinery and improved sonar systems, making them even more difficult to detect and track. These submarines represented the peak of second-generation ballistic missile submarine design, capable of destroying 160 targets per boat with their multiple independently targetable re-entry vehicles. Ohio class, the ultimate ballistic missile submarine. Commissioned starting in 1981, these massive boats displaced 18,750 tons and carried 24 Trident missiles. Each missile could deliver 8 independently targetable nuclear warheads, meaning a single Ohio carried enough firepower to destroy 192 cities. 18 boats were built, with 14 configured as ballistic missile submarines. These leviathans represented the most powerful weapons platforms ever created, capable of ending civilization as we know it. American attack submarines. The America's Submarine Hunters. Skate class. America's first production nuclear attack submarines. 4 boats commissioned between 1957 and 1959 proved nuclear submarine operations were practical and reliable. These pioneers conducted the first submerged transit of the North Pole and demonstrated that nuclear submarines could operate continuously for months without surfacing. They were small, cramped, and relatively unsophisticated, but they established American nuclear submarine doctrine, skipjack class, a revolutionary design that set the template for all future attack submarines. 6 boats commissioned between 1959 and 1961 introduced the teardrop hull form optimized for underwater speed. These sleek hunters could exceed 30 knots submerged and maneuver like no submarine before them. The USS Scorpion tragically sank in 1968, with all 99 crew members lost. The remaining boats served for over 30 years, proving the fundamental soundness of the design. The Thresher Permit class, the first truly quiet American attack submarines. 14 boats commissioned between 1961 and 1968 introduced sound-dampening technology that made them exceptionally difficult to detect. The lead boat, USS Thresher, sank during deep diving tests in 1963, killing all 129 aboard. The disaster led to comprehensive submarine safety reforms. The surviving boats, redesignated Permit class, became legendary submarine hunters, capable of trailing Soviet boats without detection. Sturgeon class, the most numerous American attack submarine class. 37 boats commissioned between 1967 and 1975 formed the backbone of America's submarine force. These versatile hunters could perform anti-submarine warfare, intelligence gathering, and special operations missions. They were remarkably quiet and equipped with advanced sonar systems that gave them significant advantages over Soviet contemporaries. Several were modified to carry special operations forces, trading torpedo tubes for SEAL delivery vehicles. Narwhal class, an experimental submarine with a revolutionary natural circulation reactor. Only 1 boat was built, commissioned in 1969. The USS Narwhal tested advanced quieting technology and reactor designs that required no reactor coolant pumps, making it extraordinarily silent. The experimental systems proved successful and influenced all future American submarine designs. It served as a test platform throughout its career, retiring in 1999. Lipscomb class, Another experimental design testing advanced reactor technology. One boat, USS Glenard P. Lipscomb, commissioned in 1974. It featured turbo-electric drive, intended to make it exceptionally quiet. The complex machinery proved maintenance-intensive and unreliable. The boat spent much of its career in repair, and the design was not repeated. It demonstrated that simplicity often trumps sophistication in submarine design. Los Angeles class. The definitive Cold War attack submarine. 62 boats commissioned between 1976 and 1996 represented the largest nuclear submarine class ever built. These hunters were fast, quiet, and deadly, capable of hunting Soviet ballistic missile submarines in their home waters. They carried Tomahawk cruise missiles, Harpoon anti-ship missiles, and advanced torpedoes. The improved Flight 3 boats, commissioned from 1988 onward, added vertical launch systems for additional missiles. These submarines dominated the underwater battlefield and continue serving today. Seawolf class, the ultimate attack submarine, designed to hunt the Soviet Akula in Arctic waters. 3 boats were commissioned starting in 1997, though design work began in the late 80s. Each cost over $3 billion, making them the most expensive submarines ever built. They could dive deeper, run quieter, and fight harder than any submarine in history. 8 torpedo tubes could launch 50 weapons, giving them devastating firepower. The Soviet collapse made such capability unnecessary, and production stopped after just 3 boats. Diesel-electric submarines. Next on the list, the conventional boats, Tang class. America's first post-war diesel submarine design. 6 boats commissioned between 1951 and 1952 incorporated lessons learned from captured German U-boats. They featured the teardrop hull form that would later influence nuclear submarine design. These boats proved that conventional submarines still had value in the nuclear age, particularly for operations in shallow coastal waters, where nuclear boats were too vulnerable. Barbell class, the ultimate American diesel submarine. 3 boats commissioned in 1959 represented the peak of conventional submarine design. They were the last diesel submarines built for the U.S. Navy, as nuclear power made conventional boats obsolete for American requirements. These sophisticated hunters served into the 90s, proving that well-designed diesel submarines remain capable platforms. Soviet Foxtrot class, Project 641, the backbone of Soviet conventional submarine forces. 75 boats commissioned between 1958 and 1971 represented the largest diesel submarine class of the Cold War. These reliable hunters operated worldwide, from the Arctic to the Caribbean. They were relatively quiet when running on battery power and carried sophisticated sensor systems. Dozens were exported to Soviet allies, spreading submarine capability across the globe. Soviet Tango class, Project 641B, an improved Foxtrot variant optimized for anti-submarine warfare. 18 boats commissioned between 1972 and 1982 featured advanced sonar systems and quieting technology. These hunters specifically targeted NATO submarines, using their battery-powered silence to ambush louder nuclear boats. They represented the peak of Soviet diesel submarine development. Soviet Kilo class, Project 877. The ultimate Soviet conventional submarine. 24 boats commissioned starting in 1980 were so quiet that NATO nicknamed them black holes for their acoustic invisibility. These sophisticated hunters combined advanced sensors, quiet machinery, and excellent weapons systems. They proved that diesel submarines remained relevant in the nuclear age, particularly for coastal defense and special operations. Over 50 were eventually built, with updated variants still in production today. Specialized submarines, the unusual designs. NR-1, America's only nuclear-powered deep submergence research submarine. Commissioned in 1969, this tiny boat displaced just 400 tons, but could dive to 3,000 feet and remain submerged for months. It featured manipulator arms, external lights, and wheels for crawling along the ocean floor. The NR-1 recovered debris from the Space Shuttle Challenger disaster and conducted countless intelligence missions. It served for 43 years, the longest-serving nuclear submarine in history. Halibut class, a guided missile submarine converted for special operations. USS Halibut was commissioned in 1960 to carry Regulus cruise missiles, but was converted in 1968 for deep-sea intelligence gathering. It successfully tapped Soviet underwater communication cables and recovered debris from sunken Soviet submarines. The boat's sophisticated equipment and highly trained crew conducted missions so secret that details remain classified 50 years later. Soviet Project 1910, the Uniform-class rescue submarine. 2 boats built in the late 70s specifically for submarine rescue operations. These specialized vessels could mate with disabled submarines and evacuate crews from depths exceeding 1,000 feet. Their existence acknowledged the dangerous nature of submarine operations and the Soviet Navy's commitment to crew safety. They represented a rare humanitarian mission in the Cold War's military competition. Dolphin-class research submarine, AGSS 555. America's last diesel submarine, commissioned in 1968 purely for research. This small boat tested advanced sonar systems, hull coatings, and operational techniques. It dove to over 3,000 feet and conducted experiments impossible with operational boats. The Dolphin served for over 40 years, finally retiring in 2007 as the Navy's last non-nuclear submarine. From diesel patrol boats to nuclear missile carriers, from titanium speedsters to ocean floor crawlers, these submarines defined Cold War naval warfare and created a strategic balance that prevented global catastrophe. They hunted each other in the depths, maintained nuclear vigilance beneath the waves, and conducted intelligence operations that changed history. Which one surprised you most? Let me know in the comments below.